I walked through the wrought iron gates of Riverside Memorial Gardens just after dawn, when the groundskeeper was still making his rounds. The morning mist clung to the grass like cobwebs, and I pulled my jacket tighter against the October chill. I've been coming here every month for 3 years now, since my wife Margaret died. Her plot was near the old oak tree she'd always admired when we drive past. But that morning, something was different. As I made my way down the familiar path, I saw a figure sitting cross-legged in the newer section, the one where they'd recently expanded. A man, hunched over, his shoulders shaking. And beside him, a little girl no more than 7, sitting perfectly still with her hands folded in her lap. My breath caught. Even from 50 yards away, I knew that silhouette. Jesse. My voice came out rough and used. I hadn't seen my son in almost 2 years. Not since his wedding to Marguerite Doherty, when her parents had made it clear I wasn't the kind of influence they wanted around their daughter's new family. Too secular, they'd said. Too worldly. I tried calling, tried visiting, but Jesse had pulled away, and eventually I'd stopped trying. Pride, maybe, or exhaustion. He didn't turn around. I walked closer, my shoes crunching on a gravel path. The little girl, my granddaughter, who I'd only seen in photos Jesse's sister had secretly shared, looked up at me with enormous gray eyes. She didn't smile, didn't move. Jesse, I said again, kneeling beside him. That's when I saw the grave marker. Fresh, granite, barely weathered. I read the inscription twice before my brain would process it. Noah Thomas Hodge, September 2024 to September 2024. In God's hands now. Whose grave is this? I asked, though somewhere deep in my gut, I already knew. Jesse turned to me then, and Christ, he looked like he'd aged a decade. His eyes were hollow, ringed with purple. His beard was unkempt, his clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them. When he spoke, his voice cracked. My son, my baby boy. He dragged a hand across his face. He got sick, just a fever at first, but it got worse. He couldn't breathe right. His lips turned blue, Dad. He was 3 days old, and his lips turned blue, and her parents. He couldn't finish. His whole body shook with sobs he was trying to swallow. I looked at the little girl. What's your name, sweetheart? Penny, she whispered. Penny Hodge. Jesse composed himself enough to continue. They said doctors were tools of Satan. That medicine was a lack of faith. Marguerite believed them. She always believed them. They said God would heal him if we just prayed hard enough. He laughed, a bitter sound that had no humor in it. 3 days. He suffered for 3 days while they anointed him with oil and spoke in tongues, and then he just stopped breathing. My blood went cold. Colder than the morning air, colder than anything I'd ever felt. Why didn't you call me? Call 911. Anyone. They took my phone the first day when I said I wanted to get help. Said I was letting Satan whisper doubts in my ear. Marguerite's father, Simon, he locked me in the guest room, boarded the door from the outside. Jesse's hands were shaking. I could hear Noah crying, getting weaker. I screamed until my voice gave out. Broke my hand trying to punch through the door. He held up his left hand, still swollen, the knuckles purple and green. Jesus Christ. They wouldn't even let me hold him when he died. Said I'd contaminated the house with my lack of faith. He looked at his daughter. Penny saw everything. They made her watch, said it would teach her about God's will. I pulled Jesse up by his arm, perhaps rougher than I intended. The rage coursing through me needed an outlet, and standing still wasn't an option. Where are they now? Home. The Doherty's compound. That's what they call it, the compound. 20 acres outside of town with the main house and 4 smaller ones. Simon's brothers and their families all live there. Marguerite's still there with them. He looked at Penny. I got her out yesterday. They said I could take her for a walk, and I just didn't go back. But they have my car keys, my wallet, everything. Get in my car, I said. Both of you. Dad, what are you? They're going to pay, I said quietly. Every single one of them is going to pay for what they did to Noah. To you. To Penny. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe. Then we plan. Jesse stared at me, and for the first time since I'd found him, something like hope flickered in his eyes. He knew what I used to do before I retired. For 15 years, I'd worked with the FBI's division on domestic extremist groups, specializing in extracting people from cults and high-control religious organizations. I knew how these people thought, how they operated, their weaknesses, and I knew exactly how to destroy them. We drove to my house in silence. Penny fell asleep in the back seat, her head against Jesse's shoulder. My son stared out the window, that haunted look never leaving his face. I kept my hands steady on the wheel, but inside, my mind was already working through scenarios, possibilities, weaknesses to exploit. The Dohertys, Simon and Marguerite Doherty. I'd heard the name before, years ago, when I was still active. Their group, the Eternal Light Fellowship they called themselves, had been on our radar, but never quite crossed the line into our jurisdiction. Isolationist, extremist religious beliefs, but technically they paid their taxes and hadn't done anything overtly illegal that we could prove. Plenty of reports of medical neglect, of children being pulled from schools, of members being cut off from outside family. But nothing that stuck. Until now. Once we were inside, I made Jesse take a shower and gave him clean clothes. I made Penny pancakes, which she ate mechanically, not speaking. When Jesse emerged, looking slightly more human, I sat them both down at my kitchen table. Tell me everything, I said. From the beginning. When did this start? Jesse wrapped his hands around the coffee mug I'd given him. I met Marguerite 2.5 years ago. She was working at that bookstore downtown, you remember? The one near the courthouse. I nodded. I remembered. She'd seemed nice enough the one time I'd met her before the wedding. Quiet, polite, pretty in an understated way. She seemed normal at first. We'd talk about books, about life. She was smart, Dad. Really smart. But she said her family was religious and kept to themselves. Jesse took a shaky breath. I should have seen the red flags. The way she wouldn't talk about her childhood. How she never wanted me to meet her parents until we'd been dating for 6 months. When I finally did, it was strange. Strange how they interviewed me. That's the only way to describe it. Simon, her father, sat me down in their living room. They have this huge house, you should see it, and asked me about my beliefs. My relationship with God. Whether I believed in modern medicine. Whether I thought the government had authority over a man's family. Jesse's jaw tightened. I thought they were just protective. Old-fashioned. I answered honestly, and Simon seemed satisfied. He said I had potential for spiritual growth. They were evaluating whether you could be converted, I said. It was a classic technique. Love bombing at first, then slowly isolating the target from their support system while indoctrinating them. Yeah, I know that now. Jesse looked down at his hands. The wedding happened fast. Marguerite said she wanted to start a family right away. Her mother, Ethel, kept talking about quiver full, about having as many children as God would bless us with. After we got married, they convinced Marguerite that we should live on the compound. Just temporarily, they said, until we saved enough for our own place. But you never left. No. And once we were there, everything changed. They controlled everything. What we ate, when we slept, what we could watch or read. Simon held family meetings every night where he'd preach for hours. If you disagreed, if you questioned anything, you were inviting Satan in. Jesse's voice dropped. When Penny was born, they wouldn't let Marguerite go to a hospital. Ethel delivered her in the house. He glanced at his daughter, who was pushing pancake pieces around her plate. It was horrible. Marguerite almost died. But they said she lived because of their prayers, and after that, she was completely devoted to them. I needed more information. Who else lives there? Simon's 2 brothers, Rodolfo Doherty and Hugh Doherty. They each have their own houses on the property with their wives and kids. Maybe 20 people total. There's also Simon and Ethel's son, Dominic. He's 30, never been married. Simon's grooming him to take over the fellowship someday. Jesse's expression darkened. Dominic's the enforcer. When Simon wants something done, Dominic does it. He's the one who boarded me in that room. Who took my phone? And Marguerite? Where does she stand in all this? She's lost, Dad. Completely brainwashed. After Noah was born, I thought maybe she'd wake up. She held him, loved him like any mother would. But when he got sick, Simon told her it was a test of faith. That if she wavered, if she sought worldly medicine, Noah would be damned. She chose their version of God over our son. I felt the rage building again, but I forced it down. Rage was useful, but only if controlled. Do they have security? Cameras? Jesse nodded. Cameras at the main gate and around the perimeter. Simon's paranoid about government surveillance. They have guns too. Lots of them. They believe the end times are coming and they need to be ready to defend their land. Perfect. Paranoia and weapons. That gave me several angles to work with. What about evidence? The death certificate. They wouldn't get one at first. Said they'd bury him on the property. But there are laws. Even they couldn't get around that completely. Eventually they had to call in, but they lied. Told the coroner Noah died of SIDS. Sudden infant death syndrome. Jesse's voice broke. They cleaned him up, made it look like he died peacefully in his sleep. The coroner barely examined him before signing off. Who was the coroner? Guy named Raymond Green. I think Simon knows him somehow. Or paid him off. That was good. A corrupt coroner was a liability, someone who could be pressured or exposed. I made a mental note to look into Green later. Penny finally spoke up, her voice small. They said Noah is in heaven now. That was God's plan. I knelt beside her chair. Penny, your baby brother died because he needed medicine and didn't get it. That wasn't God's plan. That was your grandfather Simon's choice. Do you understand the difference? She stared at me with those grave gray eyes and slowly nodded. Your dad and I are going to make sure what happened to Noah doesn't happen to anyone else. But I need you to be brave and tell me the truth about some things. Can you do that? Another nod. Did Simon or anyone else hurt you? Hit you? Touch you in ways that made you uncomfortable? They spanked me when I was bad. When I asked too many questions. She pointed to Jesse. They spanked Daddy too once. Dominic did it while Grandpa Simon watched. Because Daddy tried to use the phone. Jesus Christ. These people weren't just extremists. They were sadistic. Jesse put his head in his hands. I'm sorry, Penny. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you. We're out now, I said firmly. And we're not going back. Jesse, I need you to listen carefully. What they did, keeping you prisoner, denying Noah medical care, those are crimes. We could go to the police right now. No. Jesse's head snapped up. You don't understand. Simon has connections. The sheriff, Craig Fernandez, his kid is married to Hugh's daughter. Half the county government goes to their church. If we go to the cops, they'll cover it up. They'll take Penny back. They'll say I'm unstable, that I abandoned Marguerite. He grabbed my wrist. We can't go through official channels. It won't work. I'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made the path forward clearer. If the system was compromised, we'd have to work outside it. I'd done it before, though never for personal reasons. Okay, I said. Then we do this my way. But I need information. I need to know their routines, their vulnerabilities, who's loyal to Simon, and who might be wavering. I need to understand how their whole operation works. Jesse straightened. I can tell you everything. I've been there almost 2 years. I know that place inside now. Good. Write it down. Every detail you can remember. Layout of the property, daily schedules, who has keys to what, where they keep their money, their weapons. Everything. I pulled out my laptop. While you do that, I'm going to start making calls. Calls to who? I smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Old colleagues. People who owe me favors. Penny's sweetheart. Why don't you watch some cartoons in the living room? The TV remote is on the coffee table. She slid off her chair and disappeared into the other room. Once I heard the television click on, I turned back to Jesse. You said Simon thinks the end times are coming. That he's preparing for some kind of apocalypse. Yeah, he preaches about it constantly. Says the government will try to take their land, their guns, their freedom. But they need to be ready. What if, I said slowly, we made him think it was actually happening? What if we gave him his apocalypse? Jesse's eyes widened. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we make Simon Doherty and his family believe the world they've been afraid of is finally coming for them. And when they're scared, when they're desperate and isolated, that's when we strike. We expose them for what they really are. We make them face consequences in a way they can't escape. I lean back in my chair. But more than that, we make sure everyone knows what they did to Noah. We make them face their community, their followers with the truth. We destroy them from the inside out. Jesse paused. That's going to take time. Planning. I've got time, I said, and I've got the skills. Trust me, son. Before this is over, Simon Doherty is going to wish he'd let you take Noah to the hospital. He's going to lose everything that matters to him. His compound, his followers, his freedom, his family's respect. Everything. Jesse was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up a pen and notepad from the counter. Tell me what you need to know. Over the next 3 days, I built a complete picture of the Eternal Life Fellowship and the Doherty compound. Jesse's information was meticulous. He'd always been detail-oriented, and his time in that place had made him hyper-aware of every aspect of their operation. The compound sat on 23 acres at the end of a private road, surrounded by woods. The main house, where Simon and Ethel lived, was a 3-story Victorian-style home with 7 bedrooms. Rodolfo and his wife Josie lived in a ranch house to the east with their 4 children. Hugh and his wife Carol occupied a craftsman to the west with their 3 kids. Dominic lived in a converted barn that he'd turned into a bachelor pad. Jesse, Marguerite, and Penny had lived in a small cottage near the main house, what they called the newlywed quarters. The fellowship held services 3 times a week in a chapel Simon had built behind the main house. On Sundays, about 40 people would show up, members of Simon's extended church, most of whom didn't live on the compound but were equally devoted to his teachings. Simon funded the whole operation through some kind of investment portfolio he'd built up over decades, plus donations from church members. The fellowship was officially registered as a church, which meant tax-exempt status and very little oversight. They grew some of their own food, homeschooled all the children, and had minimal contact with the outside world. Simon preached self-sufficiency and separation from the corruption of modern society. He was charismatic for what Jesse described. A former businessman who'd had some kind of religious awakening in his 40s and had been building his following ever since. Now, in his mid-60s, he saw himself as a patriarch, a spiritual leader preparing his flock for tribulation. The security was extensive but not professional. Cameras at the gate and property corners, but they fed to a simple system in Simon's office. Motion sensors along the perimeter. Everyone on the compound carried walkie-talkies. At night, Dominic or one of the other men would do rounds. While Jesse worked on mapping everything out, I started making calls. The first was to a Landry, an old friend from my FBI days who'd gone private sector. He ran a security consulting firm that, among other things, specialized in electronic surveillance. "Keith Hodge," he said when he answered. "Been a while. You finally ready to come out of retirement and do some real work? I need a favor, Will. Off the books." His tone shifted immediately. "What kind of favor?" I explained the situation. "Not all of it, not yet. Just enough. A religious group that had let a child die, and I needed information." "Shit, we'll breathe. Yeah, I can help with that. You need surveillance? Background checks? What are we talking about? I need to know everything about Simon Doherty and his operation. Financial records, property records, any legal issues they've had. I need to know if there are any cracks in the foundation. And I need equipment. Cameras, listening devices. Things that can't be traced back to me. You're not planning anything stupid, are you, Keith?" "I'm planning something very smart, actually. Trust me." Will was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "I'll send you a care package. Should arrive tomorrow. But Keith, be careful. These religious nuts can be unpredictable." "I know," I said. "I'm counting on it." My next call was to Gretchen Henderson, a journalist I'd worked with on a series of cult exposés years back. She was relentless, ethical, and had a Pulitzer on her mantle. If anyone could help me document what was happening and get the story out there properly, it was her. "Keith, it's been ages. Please tell me you're calling with a story." "Better. I'm calling with a story you're going to want to investigate personally. Child death, medical neglect, false imprisonment, possible corruption in the sheriff's department. All wrapped up in a doomsday cult right here in our backyard." I heard her inhale sharply. "I'm listening." I gave her the basics, leaving out my personal connection for now. The coroner who signed off on the SIDS diagnosis is Raymond Green. I'm thinking he didn't do his due diligence, at best. At worst, he was paid off. The sheriff, Craig Fernandez, has family connections to the group. The whole thing stinks. "Send me what you have," Gretchen said. "Names, dates, addresses. I'll start digging." "But Keith, if this is as bad as you're saying, you need to be careful. These people won't take kindly to exposure." "I'm counting on that too," I said. By the end of the week, Pieces were starting to fall into place. Will's package arrived, a duffel bag full of high-grade surveillance equipment and a laptop loaded with software for monitoring feeds. Gretchen called back with preliminary findings. Simon Doherty had been investigated twice before for child welfare issues, but both cases had been dropped due to insufficient evidence. Raymond Green had signed off on 3 other questionable death certificates over the past 5 years, all involving children from fundamentalist families. Craig Fernandez's daughter had indeed married into the fellowship, and the sheriff himself attended services occasionally. The corruption went deeper than I'd thought. This wasn't just one bad family. It was a network. Jesse had started therapy with a trauma counselor I'd found, someone who specialized in cult survivors. Penny was seeing a child psychologist. Both of them were staying with me, and slowly, bit by bit, they were starting to seem more like themselves. Jesse smiled occasionally. Penny asked questions. They were healing. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I spent hours researching the Doherty's beliefs, reading transcripts of Simon's sermons that former members had posted online. He was obsessed with the Book of Revelation, with end times prophecy, with the idea that true believers would be tested through trials and tribulation. He preached that doctors and hospitals were part of Satan's system, designed to make people dependent on man rather than God. He believed law enforcement was becoming an instrument of oppression, that the government would eventually come for religious conservatives, that cash and gold were the only real wealth. And then I had it. The perfect plan. I called a final contact, someone I never thought I'd need again. Brad Kane, a former Army Ranger who'd gone into private military contracting after leaving the service. We'd worked together on a hostage extraction from a compound in Montana years ago. He specialized in psychological operations, convincing targets they were facing threats that didn't exist. You want to stage what? Brad said when I outlined my idea. A government raid. Or at least make them think one is coming. I need them paranoid, scattered, making mistakes. I need Simon Doherty to believe his worst fears are coming true. Keith, that's pretty elaborate. And probably illegal. The child's death was definitely illegal. Holding my son prisoner was illegal. I'm just evening the scales. Brad laughed. All right, you always were crazy. But okay, I'm in. Give me 2 weeks to assemble a team and gather equipment. We'll make Simon Doherty think the ATF and FBI are coming down on him like the wrath of God. Perfect, I said. Because once he's scared enough, once he's desperate enough, that's when we spring the real trap. Jesse walked in my office as I hung up. Was that who I think it was? Yeah, we're going operational in 2 weeks. But first, we need to do some reconnaissance. I need to see this compound for myself. How are we going to do that? They'll recognize me instantly if I go anywhere near there. I smiled. That's why you're not going. I am. The Eternal Light Fellowship held an open service every Sunday at 10 a.m. According to Jesse, Simon liked to invite outsiders occasionally, hoping to recruit new members. It was the perfect opportunity. I dressed in my most conservative clothes, slacks, a button-down shirt, a cross necklace I'd bought at a Christian bookstore. I looked like exactly the kind of person who might be seeking a more traditional, conservative religious community. I rehearsed my cover story, recently widowed, feeling lost, searching for meaning. It wasn't entirely false. The compound was 40 minutes outside of town, down a winding country road that turned to gravel for the last 2 miles. The entrance was marked by a simple wooden sign, Eternal Light Fellowship, Visitors Welcome. A camera perched on a post near the gate. I smiled at it as I drove through. The main house was impressive in a stark sort of way. White with black shutters, a wraparound porch, impeccably maintained. To either side, I could see the other houses Jesse had described, partially hidden by trees. The chapel was a separate structure, modern and glass-fronted, incongruously contemporary against the traditional architecture of everything else. There were about 30 cars in a gravel parking lot. I pulled in and sat for a moment, observing. Families walking toward the chapel. Clean-cut children in modest clothes. Women in long skirts. Men in slacks and ties. It looked wholesome. Normal. Exactly the kind of facade these groups were good at maintaining. I got out and made my way toward the chapel. A man about 30 stood at the door, greeting people as they entered. Tall, broad-shouldered, with cold eyes and a practiced smile. Dominic Doherty, I was certain. Welcome, he said, extending his hand. First time visiting us? Yes, I said, shaking his hand. I heard about your fellowship from a friend. I'm Keith. Dominic, please come in. Service starts in a few minutes. The chapel interior was simple but well-appointed. Wooden pews, a stage with a pulpit, a sound system that looked expensive. I took a seat near the back, where I could observe without drawing too much attention. The service began with hymns, traditional, familiar. Then Simon Doherty took the stage, and I understood immediately why people followed him. He was magnetic, silver-haired, with a deep voice and an earnest expression. He didn't rant or foam at the mouth. He spoke thoughtfully, almost gently, about faith and family and staying true to God's word in a corrupted world. But underneath the gentle delivery, the message was clear. The outside world was dangerous, contaminated, hostile to true believers. Only by staying separate, by following the fellowship's teachings, could they be saved. I watched the congregation. They hung on every word, nodded in agreement. Several people had notebooks out, taking notes. Afterward, there was coffee and fellowship time. Simon worked the room, shaking hands, asking people about their lives. I hung back, observing. Then he approached me. I don't believe we've met, Simon said, his smile warm. Simon Doherty, welcome to our fellowship. Keith, I said, this is my first time visiting. A friend mentioned you might have services that were more traditional than most modern churches. We try to stay true to biblical principles, Simon said. In these times, that's becoming increasingly rare. Tell me, Keith, what brought you here today? I fed him the cover story. Recent widower, feeling adrift, concerned about the direction of society, looking for community. His eyes lit up with each detail. I was exactly the kind of vulnerable target he specialized in recruiting. I'm sorry for your loss, Simon said, placing a hand on my shoulder. Grief can be isolating, but you've come to the right place. We believe in taking care of our own here, in building real community. Would you like to join us for lunch? We usually have a meal together after service. That's very kind, I said. I don't want to intrude. Nonsense. Dominic set another plate. The son appeared at his father's elbow, as if summoned. Up close, I could see the resemblance. Same sharp features, same calculating eyes. But where Simon projected warmth, Dominic was cold. Lunch was held in a dining hall attached to the chapel. Long tables, family-style serving bowls, more wholesome-looking people. I sat with Simon, his wife Ethel, and Dominic. Ethel was thin, nervous, with darting eyes. She barely spoke, letting Simon dominate the conversation. So Keith, Simon said as we ate, what do you do for work? I'm retired, I said. I used to work in private investigation. Background checks, that sort of thing. Nothing too exciting. Investigation, Simon repeated thoughtfully. That must require a certain moral flexibility. Investigating people, digging into their private lives. I only took cases where I felt I was helping someone. I said carefully. Protecting employers from bad hires, helping parents find runaway children. That sort of thing. Simon seemed satisfied with that answer. A man should use his talents in service of something greater than himself. Perhaps God brought you here for a reason. I'll let him think that. We talked for another hour about Simon's vision for the fellowship, about his concern for the future, about how modern society had abandoned traditional values. I agreed where appropriate, asked thoughtful questions, presented myself as someone searching for answers he could provide. By the time I left, Simon had invited me to return the following Sunday. He'd suggested I might want to attend one of their weeknight Bible studies. He'd even hinted that there was a cottage on the property that would be available for rent soon, Jesse and Marguerite's former home, though he didn't mention them by name. I drove away with a full picture of the compound layout, dozens of photos taken discreetly with my phone, and a recording of Simon's sermon on a device hidden in my jacket pocket. More importantly, I'd established myself as a potential convert, someone who could move freely in their world. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time to set the trap. That evening, I met with Brad Kane at a diner halfway between our cities. He arrived in jeans and a baseball cap, looking nothing like the operator he was. Got your recon done? He asked, sliding into the booth across from me. Yeah, the place is exactly what I thought it would be. Isolated, paranoid, heavily armed, and completely convinced they're righteous. I showed him the photos and layout Jesse had drawn. The key is Simon. He's the linchpin. If we can break him, make him desperate enough, the whole thing falls apart. Brad studied the images. So here's what I'm thinking. We stage signs of government surveillance. Black SUVs with tinted windows driving past the property. Someone in tactical gear accidentally spotted near the tree line. Maybe a fake utility worker asking questions in town about the compound. Build the paranoia slowly over a week or so. Then we escalate. Official-looking letters in their mailbox. Fake warrants, fake inspection notices. Phone calls from federal agents asking about their weapons cache. Make it feel like the noose is tightening. Brad grinned. By the time we're done, Simon's going to be convinced Ruby Ridge is about to happen all over again. And that's when they make mistakes, I said. That's when people start questioning him. That's when the cracks appear. Meanwhile, Brad continued. You've got your journalist friend investigating the real crimes. When a story breaks, Simon and his people will already be paranoid, isolated, turning on each other. They won't be able to mount an effective defense. It was elegant, really. We wouldn't have to break any major laws or hurt anyone. We'd just give Simon Doherty exactly what he'd always feared and let his own paranoia destroy him. There's one more thing, I said. Marguerite, Jesse's wife. She's still there, still under Simon's control. Part of me wants to save her, but another part. I trailed off. Wants her to face consequences for letting her child die. Brad finished. Yeah. We can't control what happens to her, Brad said. But if she's really as brainwashed as your son says, the fellowship's collapse might be what finally wakes her up. Or it might destroy her. Either way, that's on Simon, not on you. I nodded slowly. He was right. My focus had to be on justice for Noah and protecting Penny. Everything else was secondary. All right, I said. Let's do this. 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Brad confirmed. I'll have everything ready. You just make sure your son and granddaughter are somewhere safe when this goes down. It's going to get messy. We shook hands and parted ways. On the drive home, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The kind of focused determination that came from knowing exactly what needed to be done and having the skills to do it. Simon Doherty had built his little empire on fear and control. He'd convinced vulnerable people that he had the answers, that he could protect them from a hostile world. He'd twisted faith into something toxic and used it to justify unconscionable acts. Now, he was going to learn what real fear felt like. And when it was over, everyone would know what he'd done. The compound would be gone, the fellowship shattered, and most importantly, no other child would die because Simon Doherty thought prayer was a substitute for medicine. I pulled into my driveway to find Jesse and Penny in the living room, watching a movie. They looked up when I entered, and Jesse's expression was questioning. It's happening, I said simply. 2 weeks, and we bring them down. Jesse stood, crossed the room, and hugged me tightly. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for believing me. For helping us. That's what family does, I said. We protect each other. Something Simon never understood. Penny had wandered over and wrapped her small arms around my leg. I picked her up as she rested her head on my shoulder. Are the bad people going to jail? She asked. Yes, sweetheart, I said. The bad people are going to jail. I promise. The first sign appeared 3 days after my visit to the compound. A black SUV with government plates parked at the end of the private road leading to the Doherty property for 2 hours, then drove away. Brad's team, of course, but Simon wouldn't know that. According to a Landry who'd managed to hack into the compound's security camera feeds, Simon and Dominic had spent an hour reviewing footage of the vehicle, zooming in on the plates, trying to see who was inside. The second sign came the next day. A man in hiking gear, carrying what looked like surveying equipment, was spotted at the edge of the property line. One of Hugh's teenage sons confronted him. The man apologized, said he was with the Forest Service checking boundary markers, and left quickly. But Hugh reported to Simon that the man had seemed nervous, evasive. By day 3, Simon called an emergency family meeting. had managed to plant listening devices during my visit. Tiny, nearly invisible, stuck to the underside of chairs in the chapel in Simon's office. We could hear everything. They're watching us. Simon's voice came through clearly. I know the signs. Federal surveillance. They're building a case. Are you sure? That was Rodolfo, the younger brother. Maybe it's just coincidence. There are no coincidences, Simon snapped. I've been warning about this for years. The government wants to silence us, to shut down anyone who dares to live by biblical principles. We need to be prepared. Prepared how? Ethel's voice, thin and worried. We increase security. Double the patrols. No one comes onto this property without my approval. And we move our weapons to the secure location. If they try to raid us, we won't make it easy for them. Dad, Dominic said, maybe we should consider, getting a lawyer? Making sure our paperwork is all in order. Lawyers are part of the system, Simon said dismissively. They'll just use whatever we tell them against us. No, we handle this ourselves. The way we've always handled threats. From my office, listening to the feed, I smiled. It was working. Simon was exactly as paranoid as I'd hoped. Phase 2 began that week. Official-looking letters arrived in the Doherty's mailbox. Fake documents warning of pending inspections related to homeschooling compliance, building code violations, and firearms registration. The letters were vague enough to be plausible, threatening enough to increase anxiety. Brad's team also arranged for Agent Morrison to call the compound. The call, which we recorded, went like this. Mr. Doherty? This is Special Agent Morrison with the FBI's Domestic Terrorism Task Force. We'd like to schedule a time to come out and speak with you about some concerns that have been brought to our attention. What concerns? Simon's voice was tight. I'd rather discuss that in person, sir. Would Thursday at 2 p.m. work for you? I don't consent to any searches or interviews without a warrant. Sir, we're not looking to violate your rights. This is just a preliminary conversation. But if you'd prefer, we can certainly go the warrant route. That tends to be more invasive. You people have no right. Thursday at 2, Mr. Doherty. We'll see you then. The call disconnected. Of course, no one would show up Thursday at 2. But Simon didn't know that. For the next 4 days, the compound would be in a state of high alert, preparing for a visit that would never come. Meanwhile, Gretchen Henderson was making progress on the journalistic front. She'd obtained Noah's death certificate and found significant discrepancies in Coroner Green's report. She'd interviewed former fellowship members, 2 families who'd left the group after becoming uncomfortable with Simon's increasing extremism. Both families had stories of medical neglect, of children being denied routine care, of members being pressured to cut off contact with outside family. I've got enough for a preliminary story, Gretchen told me over the phone. But I want more. I want to interview your son, get his first-hand account. And I want to be there when this all comes to a head. This is bigger than one compound, Keith. This is about how these groups operate all over the country, how they exploit religious freedom laws to abuse and neglect children. You'll get your interview, I said, and you'll get your story. But timing is everything. We need Simon unstable, desperate. Then we hit him with the exposure. Thursday came and went. No FBI agents appeared. Simon called the number Agent Morrison had used, but it went to a disconnected line. Brad had used a burner phone. The confusion and paranoia at the compound reached fever pitch. That's when Jesse made his move. We discussed it carefully. Jesse would call Marguerite, would try one last time to reach her, to get her to leave. I'd prepared him for the likelihood that she'd refuse, that she was too far gone. But we had to try. For Penny's sake, if nothing else. She deserved to know her father had tried to save her mother. Jesse made the call from my office, on speaker, so I could hear. It rang 4 times before Marguerite answered. Jesse. Her voice was hesitant, confused. Marguerite, it's me. Are you okay? Why wouldn't I be okay? Why did you take Penny? Dad Simon is very upset. Dad Simon. Jesse's jaw tightened. Marguerite, he's not your father. And I took Penny because she wasn't safe there. Because they let our son die. Noah is with God, Marguerite said, her voice taking on a rehearsed quality. His death was God's will. A test of faith that we failed, Jesse interrupted. Noah died because your father wouldn't let us get him help. He died in pain, Marguerite, suffering, and it didn't have to happen. There was a long silence. Then, you've been poisoned by the world. Dad Simon warned me this would happen, that Satan would use you to try to pull me away from the truth. The truth is that our son is dead. Jesse's voice rose. The truth is that Dominic locked me in a room while Noah died. The truth is that your father's teachings are killing people. I can't listen to this. Marguerite's voice was shaking now, but with what? Doubt or anger? I couldn't tell. You need to bring Penny back. She belongs here with her family, where she can be raised properly. Her family is with me, away from that place. Marguerite, please, think about what happened. Really think about it. Noah was 3 days old. He had his whole life ahead of him. And now he's dead because your father. The line went dead. She'd hung up. Jesse slumped in his chair, defeated. I thought maybe if I could just make her hear me. Some people can't be saved, I said quietly. Not until they're ready to save themselves. Your job now is to protect Penny and make sure Simon answers for what he did. Jesse nodded slowly. Then let's make him answer. The following Sunday, I returned to the compound for services. The atmosphere had changed dramatically. Guards at the gate checked my ID, asked questions about who I was and why I was there. The usual friendliness was gone, replaced by suspicion. Inside the chapel, Simon's sermon was darker, more paranoid. He preached about persecution, about how the righteous would be tested, about staying strong in the face of government oppression. He mentioned vaguely that outside forces were targeting the fellowship, trying to destroy them because they refused to compromise their values. After the service, Simon approached me again, but this time his demeanor was different. Assessing. Careful. Keith, I'm glad you came back. These are difficult times for our fellowship. I noticed I said, is everything all right? Simon studied me for a moment, as if weighing whether to trust me. We're being watched, harassed by government agencies who don't like that we live according to biblical principles. It's a spiritual attack. That's terrible, I said, injecting just the right amount of sympathy. Is there anything I can do to help? Actually, yes. You said you used to work in private investigation. Do you know anything about counter-surveillance? We'd like to protect ourselves, but we're not experts in that area. This was perfect. He was inviting me deeper into his confidence, seeing me as an ally. I know a few things. I could take a look at your security setup if you'd like. Make some suggestions. That would be very helpful. Dominic, show Keith our camera system. And just like that, I had access to their entire security infrastructure. Over the next 2 hours, Dominic walked me through everything. Camera placements, motion sensors, the works. I made suggestions for improvements that would actually create blind spots Brad's team could exploit. I pointed out vulnerabilities in their perimeter that would make Simon even more paranoid. You really think someone's trying to get in? Dominic asked at one point. If someone wanted to, I said carefully they could. Your security is better than most, but it's not perfect. If I were you, I'd be worried about long-range surveillance, drones, things you might not even see. I watched Dominic's face pale. He reported every word I said back to Simon, of course. By that evening, they'd ordered anti-drone equipment and started keeping their curtains drawn at all times. The trap was closing. On Tuesday of the second week, everything accelerated. Brad's team planted evidence of federal surveillance equipment, fake tracking devices on some of the compound's vehicles, a fake listening device discovered near Simon's office window, planted where it would obviously be found. Simon lost his mind. They've bugged us, his voice came through on Will's feed. They've been listening to everything. An emergency meeting was called. All adult members of the fellowship were required to attend. Through the listening devices we'd planted, I heard Simon's full paranoid rant. This is exactly what I warned you about. The government wants to destroy us because we stand for truth. They'll manufacture evidence, make up crimes, turn families against each other. We can't trust anyone outside these walls. We can't trust local law enforcement. They're all part of the system. From this moment forward, we are in lockdown. No one leaves. No one enters. We protect our own. Simon, Rodolfo's voice, hesitant. Maybe we're overreacting. Maybe we should. Overreacting. Simon's voice was venomous. They've already taken Jesse and Penny from us. They've poisoned Jesse's mind against his own wife. And now they're coming for the rest of us. We have to be strong. We have to have faith. That's when Ethel spoke up, her voice small but clear. Simon, Jesse left because of Noah. Because you said not to take him to the hospital. The silence that followed was deafening. What did you say? Simon's voice was dangerous now. Noah died because we didn't get him help. The baby was sick, and we just prayed, and he died. Maybe Jesse was right to leave. Maybe The sound of a hand hitting flesh came through the speaker. A gasp. Crying. You dare question my authority? Simon shouted. You dare suggest that my faith, my leadership, was wrong? That baby died because his parents' faith was weak. Because Jesse allowed Satan into his heart. Everyone out, Dominic's voice taking control. This meeting is over. Return to your homes. I heard shuffling, doors closing. Then just Simon and Dominic remained. She's becoming a problem, Simon said, breathing hard. Just like Jesse. Doubt is a poison. What do you want me to do? Dominic asked. Watch her, and watch the others. Anyone who shows signs of wavering needs to be corrected before they infect the whole fellowship. This was it, the moment I've been waiting for. Simon was turning on his own family, becoming the tyrant he'd always had the potential to be. And it was time to make my final move. I called Gretchen. It's time. Publish the story. You're sure? I'm sure. And make sure you send advance copies to the Sheriff's Department and the State Attorney General. I want maximum exposure. Keith, what are you planning? Justice, I said simply. Do you have Jesse's interview ready? Recorded and transcribed. It's powerful stuff, Keith. His testimony alone could bring charges. Good. Run all. The death, the false imprisonment, the corruption, everything. Make it front page. And make sure you mention that there are more families willing to come forward. The story broke Wednesday morning in the state's largest newspaper and was picked up by national outlets by noon. The headline was devastating. Infant dies as religious sect denies medical care. Father held prisoner. Jesse's photo was included, along with a picture of Noah's grave. The article detailed everything. The fellowship's beliefs, Simon's control over his followers, the corrupt coroner, the sheriff's conflicts of interest. Gretchen had even obtained photos of the compound, showing its isolated fortress-like appearance. By midday, the media was at the compound's gates. News vans, reporters with cameras, all wanting statement from Simon Doherty. Inside the compound, chaos. I listened to the feeds as Simon raged, as Dominic tried to coordinate damage control, as members began questioning everything they'd been told. This is the persecution I warned you about. Simon shouted. Lies. All lies designed to destroy us. But then Rodolfo spoke up. Simon, we need to talk. Privately. In Simon's office, with just the two brothers present, Rodolfo's voice was hard. That article says Jesse was locked in a room while his son died. That we physically prevented him from getting help. Is that true? He was weak, Simon said. He needed to learn faith. Jesus Christ, Simon. We held a man prisoner while his infant son died. What the hell were we thinking? We were following God's will. God's will. Rodolfo's voice rose. Simon, a baby is dead. The papers are calling us a cult. The police are going to be all over us. And you're talking about God's will. You need to have faith. No, Rodolfo shouted. No, I'm done. Josie and I are leaving. We're taking our kids, and we're leaving before this whole thing collapses. If you leave, you're abandoning God. If staying means letting babies die, then I'm fine abandoning your version of God. A door slammed. Rodolfo was gone, and Simon's empire had lost its first major piece. Over the next 24 hours, more pieces fell. Hugh and his family packed up in the middle of the night and drove away. Several longtime fellowship members called Simon to say they wouldn't be returning for services. The state attorney general announced an investigation into Noah's death and the fellowship's practices. Sheriff Fernandez was placed on administrative leave pending an inquiry into his connections to the group. By Thursday evening, only Simon, Ethel, Dominic, and Marguerite remained at the compound. For people in a 23-acre fortress, surrounded by media and investigators. That's when I made my move. I called the compound's main line. Dominic answered. It's Keith, I said. The investigator who visited a couple weeks ago. I need to speak with Simon. Now's not a good time. I think he'll want to hear what I have to say. A pause. Then Simon's voice. Keith, what do you want? I want to help you, I said smoothly. I've been following the news. It looks bad, but there might be a way out of this. A way to control the narrative. Why would you help me? Because I believe in religious freedom. Because I think you're being railroaded by a hostile media. Because I pause for effect. Because my name is Keith Hodge, and Jesse is my son. The silence on the other end was profound. That's right, I continued. I'm the grandfather of the baby you let die. And you know what? I've been planning this for 3 weeks. Every strange thing that's happened, every sign of federal surveillance, every bit of paranoia you've felt, that was me. I made you think the end times were coming, so you'd show everyone exactly who you really are. You, Simon's voice was strangled. You did this, every bit of it. And now the whole world knows what you are. A cult leader who lets children die. A tyrant who imprisons people. A coward who hides behind religion to justify abuse. I'll destroy you, Simon hissed. I'll sue you, I'll press charges. With what money? Your accounts are frozen pending the investigation. With what credibility? Everyone's seen the truth. Simon, you're finished. But here's what's going to happen next. You're going to walk out of that compound and turn yourself in. You're going to face charges for Noah's death, for false imprisonment, for everything you've done. Never. Or, I continued, I can release the recordings I have of you. The ones where you talk about correcting Ethel. Where you admit to holding Jesse prisoner. Where you clearly show you knew Noah needed medical care and refused to get it. Your choice. Another long silence. Then, Dominic, get the guns. I smiled. This was exactly what I'd expected. Simon, cornered and desperate, falling back on violence. Which was why I'd made one more call before contacting him. Simon, if you're thinking about doing something stupid, you should look outside. I heard movement, then a window opening. Then Dominic's voice, Dad. There are police everywhere. SWAT team. They've got us surrounded. Because I told the state police about the weapons cache, about Simon's paranoia, about the likelihood he'd become violent when cornered. They'd been positioning themselves for the last hour, waiting for my call that Simon had been pushed to his breaking point. Simon Doherty. A voice came over a loudspeaker outside the compound. This is the state police. We have warrants for your arrest and search warrants for the property. Come out with your hands up. You bastard, Simon said to me. You set all of this up. I told you. You're going to pay for what you did to Noah, to Jesse, to Penny, to everyone you've hurt with your twisted version of faith. Now, put down the phone and walk out that door before someone gets hurt. I hung up. From my office, I listened to the live feed. I heard Simon and Dominic arguing. I heard Ethel crying. I heard Marguerite, finally, starting to question what they'd become. Dad, she said, maybe we should go with them. Answer their questions. If we didn't do anything wrong. We did everything right. Simon shouted. They're the ones who are wrong. The government, the media, your husband. They're all tools of Satan. Then why does it feel like we're the ones who are lost? Marguerite asked quietly. 30 minutes later, Simon, Dominic, Ethel, and Marguerite walked out of the main house with their hands up. They were arrested on the spot, charged with negligent homicide, false imprisonment, child endangerment, and a dozen other offenses. The police found the weapons cache Simon had been stockpiling. They found the records of donations that were more like coerced payments. They found journals and documents outlining Simon's complete control over fellowship members' lives. It was over. 3 months later, I sat in a courtroom for Simon Doherty's arraignment. Jesse was beside me, Penny between us. The girl had started smiling again, started talking more freely. Therapy was helping. She'd never forget what happened, but she was learning to process it, to understand it wasn't her fault. Simon looked diminished in his orange jumpsuit. His silver hair was greasy, his face gaunt. The charismatic preacher was gone, replaced by a bitter old man facing decades in prison. The charges were read: criminally negligent homicide in the death of Noah Thomas Hodge, false imprisonment of Jesse Hodge, child endangerment, running an unlicensed medical practice, tax evasion. Gretchen's investigation had uncovered financial irregularities too. Dominic faced similar charges, plus assault for the corrections he'd administered to fellowship members. Ethel was charged as an accessory. Marguerite, after cooperating with investigators and showing genuine remorse, was facing lesser charges and mandatory psychiatric evaluation. Coroner Raymond Green had lost his license and was under investigation. Sheriff Craig Fernandez had resigned. The entire Eternal Light Fellowship had dissolved, its remaining members scattered. "What does the defendant plead?" the judge asked. Simon's lawyer stood. "Not guilty, Your Honor. We intend to." "Actually," Simon interrupted, standing, "I'm guilty. Of all of it." His lawyer looked shocked. "Mr. Doherty, I strongly advise." "I'm guilty," Simon repeated louder. He looked across the courtroom at Jesse. At me. I thought I was doing God's work. I thought I was saving souls. But I was just scared. Scared of the world. Scared of losing control. Scared of being wrong. His voice broke. "I let that baby die because I was too proud to admit I might be wrong about medicine. I kept Jesse locked up because I couldn't stand the thought of losing another member. I built that whole compound because I wanted to play God." He sat back down heavily. "I'm guilty, and I deserve whatever punishment comes." It was the first honest thing I'd heard him say. The judge set a sentencing date. Based on the charges and Simon's confession, he was looking at 25 to 30 years. Dominic, 15 to 20. Even with good behavior, Simon would die in prison. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Gretchen was there too, having covered every angle of the story. Her series of articles had won widespread acclaim and would likely win her another Pulitzer. "Mr. Hodge, do you feel justice has been served?" one reporter called out. I stopped, turned to face the cameras. Jesse and Penny stood beside me. My grandson Noah died because a man twisted faith into something toxic and used it to control vulnerable people. Today, that man admitted his guilt. Will Noah come back? No. Will my son ever fully recover for what was done to him? I don't know. But Simon Doherty will spend the rest of his life paying for his crimes, and no other child will suffer under his leadership. So yes, justice has been served. What about Marguerite Hodge, your daughter-in-law? Jesse fielded that one. Marguerite was a victim too, in her own way. She was raised in that environment, manipulated by her father her entire life. She's getting help now. Whether we can rebuild our relationship, I don't know. But I hope she finds peace. We walked away from the cameras toward my car. Penny tugged on my sleeve. Grandpa, is it really over? I knelt down to her level. It's really over, sweetheart. The bad people can't hurt you anymore. And Noah? Is he okay now? I thought about how to answer that. Noah is at peace. And we're going to make sure everyone remembers him. Not as someone who died because of Simon's cruelty, but as a little boy who should have lived, who should have grown up and had a full life. We're going to make sure his death meant something. Penny hugged me tightly. I miss him. I know. I miss him too. Jesse put his hand on my shoulder as we walked to the car. Dad, thank you. For everything. For believing me. For planning all of this. For making sure they couldn't hurt anyone else. That's what family does, I said. We protect each other. We fight for each other. And we make sure justice is done, even when the system fails. We drove home as the sun set, the courthouse and its cameras growing smaller in the rearview mirror. My phone buzzed with texts. Will Landry congratulating me on the outcome, Brad Kane asking if I wanted to celebrate, Gretchen asking for a follow-up interview. But all I wanted was to sit in my living room with my son and granddaughter, to eat dinner together, to watch them heal, to know that the nightmare was finally over. Simon Doherty had built his empire on fear and faith twisted into something monstrous. He'd convinced people he had the answers, that only he could save them. And for a while it had worked. But empires built on lies always crumble eventually. And sometimes they just need someone to give them a push. I'd given Simon Doherty his apocalypse, made him feel hunted, desperate, pushed him into revealing his true nature. And in doing so, I'd freed everyone trapped in his web. Noah would never come back. That pain would never fully heal. But his death had exposed a monster and likely saved countless other children from the same fate. That night, after Penny had gone to bed, Jesse and I sat on the back porch with beers. You know, Jesse said, there's probably a dozen things you did that were technically illegal. Probably I agreed. The fake surveillance, the staged letters, the harassment campaign. Yep. You could get in trouble if anyone looked too closely. I smiled. Good thing Simon's in no position to file complaints. And good thing everyone else involved is too happy about the outcome to ask too many questions. Jesse laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd heard from him in months. You're a scary man when you want to be Dad. Only to people who deserve it, I said. Simon Doherty hurt my family. He killed my grandson. There was no way I was letting that stand. What about Marguerite? What do you think happens to her? I considered that. I think she'll struggle. She'll have to face what she did, what she allowed to happen. That's going to be hard. But she's young, and with the right help, maybe she can rebuild her life. Maybe she can even be a mother to Penny again someday. Do you think I should forgive her? I think forgiveness is something you give yourself, not something you give away. If forgiving Marguerite helps you heal, do it. If it doesn't, don't. Either way is okay. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. Noah would have been 4 months old next week, Jesse said quietly. I know. I wanted to teach him to fish, to play catch, all the things you taught me. You still can, I said, just with different kids. Maybe with Penny's kids someday. Noah's memory lives on through us, through the choices we make, through the family we build going forward. Jesse nodded, wiping his eyes. Yeah, you're right. Later, after Jesse had gone to bed, I sat alone with my thoughts. 3 months ago, I'd been a retired widower visiting my wife's grave, living a quiet, small life. Then I'd found my son at that cemetery, learned about the horrors he'd endured, and everything had changed. I'd used every skill I'd developed over decades, psychological manipulation, surveillance, strategic planning, to destroy a cult leader and his organization. I'd pushed him to the breaking point, made him reveal his true nature, ensured he'd face justice. Some might say I'd gone too far, that I'd taken the law into my own hands, that my methods were questionable at best. But when I thought about Noah, about that tiny grave, about the life that was stolen because of one man's arrogance and cruelty, I felt no regret. None at all. Simon Doherty had played God with people's lives. Now he'd spend the rest of his life in a cell, with nothing but time to contemplate his sins. And my family was safe. Jesse was healing. Penny was smiling again. That was all that mattered. I raised my beer to the stars, to Margaret, to Noah. Justice served, I said softly. Rest easy now. The night air was cool and clear, and for the first time in 3 months, I felt at peace. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.